Oh my goodness, thank you all so much. We know that all or a huge amount of our activism right now happens online. A huge amount of our personal correspondence happens online. A huge amount of our work happens online. And I'm here today to try to make some connections with folks in this community so that together we can stand up and make sure it's a safe place and a place of free speech and a place of privacy and a place of innovation, because I think if we're going to solve the climate crisis, we need to stand up in the places where we're communicating, connecting, and living. So, cards on the table. I'm kind of here to recruit you. Or more importantly, maybe be recruited by you. Because I think that these fights have been a little bit more siloed than they need to be. And our goal here, and by us I mean I'm bringing a panel this afternoon as well of activists, technologists, and lawyers to talk about some of the places where we think about intersection. But my real goal here is to try to get you all thinking about the places of intersection and to think of us as a resource that can help serve you. So that's why I'm here. What's our mission is up there. I think that's pretty good. But what I want to talk about is where we can connect, where we can find places to stand together, where we can find some places where we might do some impact litigation and push the law in ways that can help protect not just the people in this room, but all the people who rely on us if we're going to save the planet. So my goal right now in this very short period of time is to give you an overview of the kinds of things that EFF does and that I think can serve you, but also to kind of serve as a layer of frosting over the deep cake that we will bake this afternoon at 3 o'clock when I have the actual experts from my team here to talk with you. What we're going to talk about includes both kind of what I think of as prevention, mitigation, and adaptation. So the first is prevention, which is how do we protect ourselves against what we know is happening, which is this community is surveilled and tracked and watched at a very high degree by the powers that be, because the people who know what you're planning next can undermine you better than the people who don't know. And I want to talk about some resources that EFF has available, but also get you thinking about this. Now, I want to stop for a second. Sometimes when technical people show up to a conversation with protesters and activists, what we tend to do accidentally is scare the pants off you. I want y'all to keep your pants on, at least for now. But I do want to talk a little bit about some of the work that we've done to try to help people be better protected against the kind of surveillance that we're seeing against people who are standing up for climate justice. But also, a note of caution, these steps aren't going to absolutely protect you. In order to really protect us, we're going to need to make some policy and legal changes, which is, by the way, why I'm bringing a lawyer this afternoon. But I do want to talk through some of the things that we've seen. EFF has a set of materials that we call surveillance self-defense materials. These are materials for people who are engaged in various kinds of activities where we think they might come under special surveillance or even broad surveillance by governments or companies. And we know that this has hit the climate justice community very hard already. And the way that we've tried to organize these materials is based on what technical people call threat modeling, but what I call who you are. What are you doing? What are the kinds of protections you need based upon who you are? So I'm going to give you a couple of examples of things that might be useful. This is all up on our website, or you can come find me or any of the EFF people afterwards to kind of talk through how this works. But it should help get a starter grounding in how to think about protecting yourself so it doesn't feel so overwhelming. The first we call them playlists. The first playlist is if you're a defender. And this is really aimed at people, especially who are doing defense work, maybe in places that don't have as strong a commitment to rule of law. Don't get me wrong, I think the American government could do a lot better about rule of law, but it is the case that we see a lot more violence against people abroad, including murders of people abroad engaged in climate activity, than we do right now in the United States. So there is a playlist here, I know it can be hard to read, but of the kinds of things that we think would be very helpful to people when they think they're being monitored by their government. And including things about crossing the U.S. border. Right now we have a very big problem in the United States that the U.S. government has taken the position that the U.S. border is a rights-free zone, where even if you're American, you don't have the same rights that you might have once you're inside the country. This is wrong. We've already brought one lawsuit to try to fix it, and I'm looking for another, because your rights go with you in your person, in your body, not depending on where you are. But we have some tips and some suggestions for people who are in that category of people. We have another set for people who are activists or protesters, people who are going to protest activities, and what you can do, how to build a plan with your friends to keep your communications safe, how to choose your tools, how to protect yourself in your social network organizing. There isn't an activism act these days that I know of that doesn't have at least some link to social media activism. And how to do very simple things like creating strong passwords and protecting the devices that you might take with you when you're going to a protest activity. And then a third category that I suspect will be helpful to these people, this is for journalists and also researchers who are on the move, people who might have other people's information that they're collecting, whether they're doing reporting of one kind or another, and how can you best take the steps to keep that information safe, not just when your information is on the line, but when the information of people who might have trusted you with it is on the line. And there's a set of things, as you can see, it's quite a long list of the kinds of things that journalists should think about doing, including how to safely delete stuff if things start to go wrong and you don't want to have that information in your hands. So those are some of the kind of what I think of as prevention tools that we make available. We also help work with some organizations individually, or can match you with other people who work with organizations individually to try to set yourself up for resiliency against these kinds of situations. Now, occasionally, not occasionally, more often than we'd like, the subpoenas come, the warrants come, looking for information about your activism. EFF has done a few things to directly represent activists. As Kara mentioned, I have a long history with a company called Chevron and their activities to intimidate and occasionally murder environmental activists. One of the things that we were able to do a few years ago was to help some of the people who were working on the case involving Chevron in Ecuador, who faced some very, very broad subpoenas seeking information, and fight back against those and get them kind of nailed down to size for what was reasonable in the fight. So we do direct legal representation of two. Just because you get a subpoena or the cops show up with a warrant doesn't mean the fight is over. Please reach out. Again, if we can't help you, we'll try to find other people who can. Another area where our technologists have done some research and we've done some work has to do with some of the mass surveillance tools that we see being deployed against people, whether that's license plate readers. In this particular instance, we sent some folks to Standing Rock because they were using these things called IMSI catchers. These are fake cell phone towers that handle people's calls, but also track who's in the area based upon the location information. They're called IMSI that your cell phone provides. So we did some research about that and are continuing to track it. We think this is a pretty go-to tool for police and other law enforcement when there is mass protest activity and they want to get identifying information or close to it for the people who go there. So we're continuing to do research on this and try to think about ways that we can help people protect against it and counteract it, but also continuing to bring it to the attention of law enforcement. In an early IMSI catcher case that we handled, we found that law enforcement was using this by basically lying to a judge about what it did, and we were able to uncover the lie and require law enforcement to get an actual court order based on truthful information about what they were doing to do it. So even when we can't block it entirely, we can begin to scale it back and bring things within the realm of rule and law. And I think that these are things that are going to be important for this community, because the climate justice movement wants to be out in the streets, it wants to be loud, and wants to be making noise. Another thing we do where we might be able to be some service of you is we do a lot of mapping of where police surveillance is. One of the people who's coming this afternoon is my colleague Beryl Lipton, who has done more work on FOIA, Freedom of Information Act requests, Public Records Act requests, trying to map the kinds of surveillance tools that we know the police have access to that get turned on the rest of us. We actually have a tool called the Atlas of Surveillance, where if you're doing your own public research or otherwise doing it, you can feed it into something so that information becomes available with some pretty good mapping, so people know what kind of surveillance is in their area. And so that's work that we continue to do. I will say that we had a pretty big setback in San Francisco just in the March elections. Some of you may, if you're local, you may know about Prop E. Proposition E was a couple years ago, EFF and our friends at the ACLU and a big coalition of Bay Area groups got some basic police accountability and limitations on surveillance, use of surveillance equipment by the San Francisco Police Department. These things go back and forth, and in Prop E, we just saw a lot of that rolled back by honestly scaring the pants off of the few people in San Francisco who vote in primary elections. They were able to roll back years of work on police accountability, and now the police in San Francisco can deploy mass surveillance equipment for a year before they have to tell us about it. So we've got work to do. Yep. I wish I'd given this speech before that election, because we were close. Anyway, but mapping what the police are doing, because often the police, local police and the feds get this equipment without any of us knowing it, without any local accountability. And getting some local accountability, a set of ordinances that we call CCOPS ordinances, is really an important first step to figuring out what's going on and empowering people to take the steps they need to roll it back. And again, we know these technologies get used on people who are engaged in climate activism, in indigenous people, in marginalized people at a disproportionate rate. If you look at the mapping we did, and as part of the Atlas of Surveillance, or another thing about where the automated license plate readers are in Oakland, those of you who live in the Bay Area, I bet you can predict where those are. They are targeted at marginalized communities, the people who are already over-policed, and the lily white hills, not so much. What's going on there, right? We need to recognize that these tools, while they're sold as safety, are really talking about a narrow kind of safety for the law enforcement and not a lot of safety for all the rest of us. By the way, Prop E also authorized high-speed chases again, so just in case you thought it was only the digital part that sucked, the whole thing. So these are kind of what I'm talking about is prevention, kind of mitigation of the kinds of things we're seeing. But there's also affirmative steps we can do together to go forward. And two of these are the right to repair and interoperability. Right now we have a tremendous problem with our devices being throwaway devices, right? They have planned obsolescence. Our printers, you can only use certain kinds of ink that cost $1 zillion, and then when your printer breaks, you can't get it fixed. You can't get your phone fixed. You think you can't get it fixed. These technologies are not magic. They can be fixed, they can be repaired, and they can be improved. And the things that are stopping us from having the ability to do that is not the technology, it's the law and the policy and the business models. And EFF has partnered with our friends in the Right to Repair Coalition, as well as groups around the country, to try to basically get us the ability to repair our stuff again so we don't have to throw it away. Don't let them kid you. Just because something has a silicon chip in it doesn't mean that you can't fix it if it breaks. We partnered with farmers in the Midwest who can't fix their own tractors because of laws like Section 1201 of the Digital Millennium Copyright Act and a whole bunch of other legal gobbledygook that I could rail off to you and have you all go to sleep. But these laws need to be fought back, these policies need to be fought back, and these business models need to be fought back against if we're going to get out of this situation in which we're filling our landfills with digital gadgets over and over and over again. And of course, we know where those end up, right? They end up where marginalized people live. They end up where indigenous people live. They end up in places where they cause tremendous harm to people who are least able to exercise power. So that's an area where I think about adaptation and moving forward as an area where we have a lot of overlap. Now, the other one is called interoperability. That's also a kind of a technical term, but this is the ability to take the tools that you use and adapt them and have choices around them. These are tools that can help us with resiliency, right? If you have a computer that is not very energy efficient, somebody else could help you develop a piece of software or something else that can help make that tool more efficient, but they're being blocked right now. Again, they're being blocked by law and policy, not by technology. But if we're gonna have a future where we have adaptation and resiliency, we have to extend those values to our digital gadgets as well as our non-digital ones. And interoperability is a way that we can take these tools that might otherwise be at end of life and give them another life, that might otherwise not represent our values and give them more values, that might not protect our privacy and make things that protect our privacy. So it's a technical term, it's a technical tool, but what it really means is the way digital networks and digital tools work, we actually have a possibility to help change them. Everybody has applied updates to their software. Those updates can be upgrades or downgrades. Right now, the companies who sell us the things are the ones who are in charge of whether they are upgrades or downgrades. And my friend Cory Doctorow has coined a term to talk about this called enshittification, right? Where it's all going down. Interoperability, right to repair, these kinds of affirmative values can help us get back to the place where if this thing that you've bought isn't working for you anymore, somebody else or you can make something that makes it better and helps you avoid throwing it in the trash. And then finally, I was joking that, my speech here went from, Dolores Huerta, a living legend, to how can you meme courageously? This is the meme courageously part of my speech, but we have done a lot of work with activist groups who are taking on more powerful entities and finding themselves on the back ends of attempts to censor them. This is a campaign that was run by some friends of ours against Shell. As you can tell, there's a bit of a theme in the things that I'm showing you here because oil companies drive me crazy. But this was a campaign against Shell Oil, which is famously a sponsor of the New Orleans Jazz and Heritage Festival, that was trying to make sure that people attended that festival, understood the role that Shell played in Nigeria and elsewhere in causing trouble. Shell tried to get them taken down. They went to their provider. They went to their provider's provider. They went all the way up because that's how internet hosting works. And we had to go all the way up too to get this information able to stay up. But these are things that people in the climate justice movement face all the time in areas where we can help. And it's not just a defensive posture, there's offensive posture. EFF has been part of a couple of large coalitions trying to strengthen our anti-SLAPP laws. SLAPP laws are laws that let you bring an affirmative action to somebody who tries to silence you online. We have quite a strong one here in the state of California, but we need a federal one. And we need them in states across the country that are very strong. So we've done a lot of work trying to support those laws because right now when people are doing public participation, they're doing it online. And so we need the SLAPP laws to extend across the country and around, and my dream, around the world, so that if somebody tries to shut you up, it's not just that you win, it's that they have to pay your attorney's fees. And then the final area is in the area of open data. And again, this is something that I think is an affirmative thing that we can stand with people on. A lot of times people in communities don't have access to the information that their governments and others are collecting about them. This is work that we have done for a very long time, trying to make sure that if the government funds a study, the people who are impacted by this study get access to it. That's what open data means. And similarly, we've done some work around patents and trying to make stupid patents go away, because we often see things like patents on rice or other things that stand in the way of local people being able to grow their own food, access their own tools, fix their own tools. So we do a set of things around intellectual property laws that are trying to aim at opening up information. We believe that all the world's people should have access to all the world's knowledge, and that's going to take a lot of work right now. So that is my very brief overview. This is my frosting. I hope that if this has sparked some interest in you and how your work or work of people you know might intersect with the work that we do, that you will come this afternoon at 3 or reach out to us. We're based in San Francisco, info@EFF.org. That is the easiest way to get to the wonderful person named Haley, who helps make sure that if you have a question, it gets to the right person at the organization. We are 100 strong lawyers, activists, and technologists, and we think that this community needs support, and we stand ready to help you. Thanks.